Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 11:01 a.m. on the, can't remember what day it is today. Of course, it's the day after Valentine's Day, the 15th of February 2026. It's another cool rainy day, currently 23 degrees Celsius in Brisbane, so it's very, very lovely, but it's raining. It's been raining now for 2 days. Not heavy rain, just, steady drizzle, which is good for the ground, I guess. There's flood warnings for other parts of Queensland though, so I guess other parts of Queensland are being hammered with a lot more rain than we're getting here at Holland Park. But, it is what it is. Like Crowded House says, always take the weather with you. So it's a bit of a morose looking day because the skies are all grey, silvery grey with a lot of light behind them. I think it'll be a nice day tomorrow. There's a lot of sunshine sort of backdrop to it. But, it's just everywhere you look. No cloud, just grey mist across all 4 directions. Well, the 2 directions that I can see from my chair here in my studio. The birdie boys are very quiet and a bit morose too. I think they're feeling a bit depressed because they haven't been out in the garden now for 3 days. So it's not a good life with the birdies, is it? Having to stay inside? But you don't want to be out in the rain, do you? No, they don't. They really don't. Oh, they probably wouldn't mind too much. I guess theoretically I could just stick them out even though it's raining. There's no cold wind blowing through. Don't know why, but my ear's suddenly itchy. I'm wearing these earrings that I made a long time. I had them up for sale, but no one looks at my website. And I haven't had any contact with my friend, so I can't ask him to just take the website down because there's no point in having it up because nobody buys. And my prices are way too cheap now with this increase in silver. They were always cheap. I kept them cheap for a reason, try and get things flowing, but no one bought from me. So I think I've just started wearing things that I actually had for sale. These are quite sweet though. They're New Zealand sixpences. 1936, and on the back they have, on the obverse of the coin, we have good old King George. But anyway, they didn't sell, and I thought, fuck it, might as well enjoy wearing them. So yeah, I'll have to bite the bullet and contact him eventually and ask him kindly to take that website down, which he will be upset about because he actually put a lot of work into making it for me, and but it's nothing. There are no sales. And anyway, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. It's not like I depend on sales for a living. If I did, I would have been dead by now. A long time dead. So it's a reminder to be grateful for the only thing that the government has done for me to compensate for the years of systemic abuse and depriving me of the equivalent of 4 homes and my wealth as a young woman, is they've kept me on a disability pension for my nerves, and provided me with a roof over my head. So what they took away, they kind of gave back in a backhanded fashion, but keeps me in a kind of a open air prison because I can't afford to travel, I can't afford to buy my own home, I can't afford to get out of the poverty trap, which causes me a fair bit of distress, which was why I thought that if I learnt how to do silversmithing and make lovely things, I might be able to get a little bit of a career for myself making and selling jewellery. But I started it in early 2021 in the midst of the COVIDian madness. And I have a fairly good idea that I wasn't supported because of my views on what was being done to the global population. And I feel certain that was another reason why there was no traffic put through to my website, and it wasn't generative, and why I have not been supported. And it's not a pity me party. I'm sure I'm not the only one that was draconianly brutalised because we had the courage and the couth to say no. But they haven't taken my pension off me as punishment, because I have a basic human right to, be provided for. But accessing, medical facilities has been fraught and difficult in the past 5-6 years as well, to the point where, my doctor had to pay for private care for me, which is outrageous when your doctors are having to protect you in that way, because you can't get protection from your own state government. It's heinous. It's tantamount to it is systemic abuse, and it is tantamount to kind of manslaughter, because if I get something really serious and can't access treatment, they're leaving people to die. But I'm okay for now. I went and demanded that I get put on that waiting list for the skin doctors. How that will eventuate, I don't know. But after that dreadful heat wave we had that aggravated all my skin cancers, all little tiny ones just all flared up, it seems to have settled down a little bit, but still it needs to be checked on once a year as a basic human right to keep me to avoid metastasizing, skin cancers getting into the lymph nodes and spreading like wildfire, as happened to my uncle in Germany, my biological uncle. It's a risk. It's a risk factor. But anyway, that's all in the process of being dealt with, because I fought hard again, to the point where I was ill for a week after, actually. My nerves were so shattered from, and all the weirdness, when you go to hospital, like all the people are weird now, like weird, and it feels like I'm living through some kind of alien or horror movie. It really is. And I know I'm not imagining it, because other people have mentioned that they're finding it very difficult being out in public now. Isn't that dreadful? What has happened to our Homo sapiens sapiens species? And it goes beyond just being trauma issues, because I'm a complex PTSD survivor. I've lived with trauma since very early infancy. So it's more than just a trauma response. It's spiritual, and it's chemical in nature, given what was inserted into our bodies under threats of homelessness and joblessness and loss of status. And when it came to me, I said, well, you can't really take much more away from me than you already have done. So I held my line. And now I am hated for that. Even that, for just being stubborn and holding my line. I observed when did I go to the art gallery? Friday the 13th of February. there were quite a few homeless people sitting quietly, you know, not causing any disturbances, just living day by day like everyone else on this planet. But I was surprised how many homeless people were surrounding the state library and out sitting out in the rain and looking very compromised and sad. But it was a rainy day, so it's par for the course. You feel a bit depressed in Brisbane when we have grey days, because we are very spoilt with our climate of having lots and lots of sunshine. So, you know, just watching a man walking around with a knapsack and an umbrella in the rain, but oh well, you're allowed to walk around by the gods. It was just a bit odd though, because he came up here and then he just shuffled back off down the other direction. Perhaps he went to visit one of my neighbours, and they're not home. I don't know what that was about. Perhaps he thought about walking through the forest and decided it's too wet and changed his mind. I sometimes do that. Go off somewhere and think, oh, blah. Anyway, so it's a beautiful day. The trees are enjoying having moisture, and that big one I'll show you. There must be some kind of breeze out there. The big buffy fluffy one is waving his branches and leaves around, and the trees on my land are actually very still. Yeah, comparatively still. So that must be getting some kind of updraft from, I don't know what direction, because mine aren't affected. It's a bit strange sometimes. I call it the dancing tree because it's always dancing. But it's okay. Happiness is important even for trees, people of Earth. So let us continue on with completing chapter 5, but it's another section that is titled Interlude for Spirits. What seest thou else in the dark backward and abysm of time? Shakespeare, The Tempest. Wow. What seest thou? Well, thou seest the wavering trees. Oh, the wind must have picked up now, because even my tree's waving around now. That's okay. Fresh air and rain. Interlude for spirits. You know what happens when we mention anything spiritual, don't you? The Mama T gets visitations from her spirit people. Not necessarily my own spirit people, but I wander through, see what I'm getting up to these days. I'm doing very well, spirits. I'm doing very well. I'm feeling a bit tired today, but I had a good long sleep and I'm doing okay. Not very long after Leslie's court case, Margot was beset by another affliction to keep company with her acne. She suddenly started to put on weight, and before long, to her horror, she was almost circular. Andrucelli, our doctor, was called in to view this mystery. He uttered a long series of distressed pose as he viewed Margot's obesity. He tried her on several pills and potions and a number of diets to no effect. He says, Margot confided to us, tearfully at lunch one day that he thinks it's glandular. Glandular? Said Mother, alarmed. What does he mean? Glandular. I think what he means it's something hormonal, since it's affecting his skin, causing dreadful acne. Nowadays they'd just poison her with Ozempic and turn her into a walking, shuffling, fucking modern day Biafran, which is not funny, people of Earth. Not funny at all. I don't know, wailed Margot. Must we always discuss your ailments at mealtimes? Inquired Larry. Larry, dear, Andrew Shelley says it's glandular, said Mother. Rubbish, said Larry airily. It's puppy fat. Puppy fat, squeaked Margot. Do you know how much I weigh? What you want is more exercise, said Leslie. Why don't you take up sailing? Don't think the boat's big enough, said Larry. Beast, said Margot, bursting into tears. You wouldn't say things like that if you knew how I felt. Larry, dear, said Mother placatingly, that wasn't a very kind thing to say. Well, I can't help it if she's wandering around looking like a watermelon covered with spots, said Larry irritably. One would think it was my fault, the way you all go on. Something will have to be done, said Mother. I shall see Andrew Shelley tomorrow. But Andrew Shelley repeated that he thought her condition might be glandular, and that, in his opinion, Margot ought to go to London for treatment. So, after a flurry of telegrams and letters, Margot was dispatched to London and into the tender care of two of the only worthwhile relatives with whom we were still on speaking terms. My mother's cousin Prudence and her mother, Great Aunt Fan. Apart from a brief letter saying she had arrived safely and that she, Cousin Prue and Aunt Fan had taken up residence at a hotel near Notting Hill Gate, and that she had been put in touch with a good doctor, we heard nothing further from Margot for a considerable length of time. I do wish she would write, Mother said. Don't fuss, Mother, said Larry. What's she got to write about anyway, except to give you her new dimensions? Well, I like to know what's going on, said Mother. After all, she is in London. What's London got to do with it? Asked Larry. In a big city like that, anything can happen, said Mother darkly. You hear all sorts of things about girls and big cities. Really, Mother, you do worry unnecessarily, said Larry in exasperation. Actually, no, she does not. One should always worry about one's girls, whether they're in big cities or in small towns, on the basis of half the population, a large degree of that half population are capable of doing considerable harm to girls and women. I'm sorry to say that, fellas, but let's be real here. If it was my daughter in a foreign city, I'd be terrified for her too. Oh wait, I was, when my daughter Crystal was in Ireland and England for 3 years. I was terrified for her the entire time. And now since she's been back in 2018, now she can't even make eye contact with me when I walk into, her workplace. It's appalling. I mean, I didn't go there to see her. I went there to see the art, but it's appalling. It's appalling. The stress I went through over that girl. And in a way, even though we've been estranged for over nearly 2.5 years now, it's still a form of stress as a mother. You still worry, you know. You worry. It's always in the background. I try to push it away because she's 40 and she has a choice in who she wants to associate with. If she doesn't want to associate with her mother or have contact, that's her decision making, flawed though it may be, poisoning from the COVIDian madness that it may be. I'm very convinced of that. But, you know, free will, people of Earth. Free will. And, but I do worry. Anyway, enough about that. But, you know, it's also typically male of Larry to go, oh, what are you worried about? Because most men, unless they have their own daughters and are particularly fond of them, don't worry about things that mothers worry about. Unless you've been a mother, you don't, I guess, you get spared a lot of that stress, triggering or stress. Yeah, well, I guess it is a form of triggering in a way. And, you know, you can type on the typewriter platen and shove it off, but it creeps back up on you because it's constantly there in the back of your mind. Is my daughter safe? Is she looking after herself? Is she being treated kindly and courteously? You know, has she got somewhere to live? Is she loved? Does someone even give a flying fuck about her? And so on and so forth. Anyway, I got to stop that or I'll work myself into a tizzy and there's no point because I can't do anything about it. So on we go and on we go. Really, Mother, you do worry unnecessarily, said Larry in exasperation. What do you think's happened to her? For heaven's sake. Do you think she's been lured into some den of vice? They'd never get her through the door. It's no joking matter, Larry, said Mother severely. But you get yourself into a panic about nothing, said Larry. I ask you, what self-respecting white slaver is going to look at Margot twice? I shouldn't think there's one strong enough to carry her off, anyway. Isn't that dreadful? You know, he really is quite awful. I would have just slapped him one, you know. Unable to imagine what it's like to be female moving through the world in every generation for time immemorial. Well, sisters are doing it for themselves and we survive and we're powerful in our own core and every generation has its challenges and somehow we get through. Those of us who are destined to survive, that is. Don't ask me how I've done it. I can't explain it. It really did come from very determined supernatural forces and sources. The Holy One, in all manifestations of holiness, was determined I remain here on planet hellscape or paradise according to the weather and what mood I'm in and how kind people are being to each other. Right. Well, I'm worried, said Mother, and I'm going to send a cable. So she sent a cable to cousin Prudence, who replied at length saying that Margot was associating with people she didn't approve of, that she thought it would be a good thing if Mother came to talk some sense into her. Immediately, pandemonium reigned. Mother, distraught, dispatched Spiro to buy tickets and started packing frantically until she suddenly remembered me. Feeling it would do more harm than good to leave me in the tender care of my 2 elder brothers, clearly since they lack empathy for their sister, she decided that I should accompany her. Sound. So Spiro was dispatched to get more tickets, and yet more packing was done. I regarded the whole situation as heaven sent, for I had just acquired a new tutor, Mr. Richard Kralewski, who was endeavouring with grim determination in the face of my opposition to instruct me in irregular French verbs. And this trip to England, I thought, would give me a much-needed respite from this torture. The journey by train was uneventful, except that Mother was in constant fear of being arrested by the fascist carabinieri. Right. I presume they mean travelling through Italy then. This fear increased 1,000-fold when, at Milan, I drew a caricature of Mussolini, little shit, on the steamy window of the carriage. I've got a segue about that I'll share with you in a minute, but I'll just finish the paragraph off. Mother scrubbed at it for quite 10 minutes with her handkerchief, with all the dedication of a washerwoman in a contest, before she was satisfied that it was obliterated. Very wise, given the times, contemporary context of that timing. God help us. So anyway, I'll segue here. So it must have been after my separation from my husband. So my daughters were 9 and 7. And in what used to be called the Maya Centre, which is a big department building, lots of also boutique shops. What do they call it now? Downtown. Stupid name. But anyway, I still think of it as the Maya Centre. So anyone from Brisbane knows exactly the building, that I mean. And it's in the Queen Street Mall. And but back in the day when my children were 9 and 7, so 1995, there used to be at the very top level a kind of amusement park with this, what was it actually? Kind of a monorail dressed up as a dragon that went round the whole top of the building, and look, the children loved it. And there was a wonderful store there. What was that called? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it was done like a forest, and they had all these plush toys of all these magical looking forest type fairy creatures. I can't remember the name of the shop now. It closed down eventually, which I was bitterly disappointed, because I used to love to take my children there. It was so magical, and really so much work had gone into it and so thought out. But I guess if people don't buy, can't sustain the business, which was a great shame. This is how people's lives get ruined when you're not supported financially in your business, or maybe they overextended themselves and had other stores and franchised out. That can often destroy you. My former husband wanted to turn our chicken takeaway shop, Chicken Express, into a franchise, and I wouldn't allow it because, it was a good business on its own merits, but I felt getting into a franchise would overextend us, and he didn't really like working all that much. He was too focused on going fishing and leaving the running of the business to a manager who didn't give a flying fuck. And ultimately our business crashed after I left too, because no one cared, no one bothered, and apathy and self-destruction, self-sabotage. And of course he blames me for that, but he destroyed that business. In his own words, 50% of nothing is nothing. Well, we both ended up with pretty much nothing, although I ended up with a hell of a lot less, with 2 little girls to support while being terrorised by maniacs. But that's not the segue. We'll rewind. So, of course I'm going through this very difficult separation, and Jared, who, you know, was my employee in our business, it's how we met 34 years ago this month, you know, was being a good friend to me and being very supportive of me. Was very kind. He was a very kind young man, actually. And of course I was off my head most of the time because I was very trauma activated, because I'd been freshly strangled for the first time by someone my husband paid $50 to rough me up, which I'm livid about to this day, but what can you do? It's what people do. They kick you when you're down and vulnerable, and knew I had no one to protect me, and that my family were rotten, and what was I going to do? I tell you what I should have done. I should have taken my 2 children and my pets and the clothes we were dressed in, and I just should have taken us interstate, maybe to Perth or somewhere as far away from that monster and my mother and stepfather and everyone, and just assumed a new identity and got us far away. But I thought I was doing the right thing and letting my children have access to their father and maintain some kind of normality, and well, nothing was normal about any of that. None of it was normal, and it contributed to my children hating me as well, you know, internalizing it that I was to blame for everything that happened, which I was not. I was trying to get us safe, ironically. But anyway, rewind. So we're up, and Jared and I are having an outing with the children. It was obviously my weekend with the children. We alternated every second week. So I said to Jared, let's go to the Maya Centre and take the children. You know, we'll look around the shops in the Maya Centre. I couldn't afford to buy much anyway, but just look around at everything. We looked at the toy shops. We did all the things that my little girls love to do, you know. And we went up to this amusement centre up in the top of the building. And so I left the girls with Jared alone for a brief amount of time. I said, I've got to go off to the loo. And he said, yes, that's fine, you know. And so I go off to the loo, and I was probably only gone about 10 minutes. I think I had to wait. There was a bit of a queue, and so I was gone a fair amount of time, but not terribly long, you know. Anyway, I come out and I do my zombie shuffle because I was very unwell. Probably had to rush to the loo because of my gut, which was under constant strain from all the traumas and the psych meds and you name it. I got slammed with it every which way. So there was that. So anyway, I come back and I'm feeling ill and wrung out, you know, and struggling, and both my girls see me coming, mummy, gleefully, and Jared turns to me and he was white like a ghost and even sweating in the face, and he went, oh my God, Tanya, oh my God, thank God you're back, oh my God, what has happened? I thought something terrible had happened, like someone had attempted to kidnap them, or something really terrible had happened. Well, something really terrible did happen, but not to that extreme. But I said, what has happened, Jared? My God, you look terrible. Are you okay? And he went, no, I'm not okay. Do not ever leave me alone with Jasmine ever again. What has happened? What has happened? I said. He says, you wouldn't believe it, Tanya. I'm having trouble believing it myself. He's looking like this, all traumatized. I went, what's gone on? He says, your daughter, Jasmine, looks down at Jasmine. Jasmine smirks. I mean, she's 7. She's a bit oblivious, actually, to the enormity of how dangerous and life-threatening it potentially was. She's a child. So Jared goes, your daughter almost got me beaten up. My daughter got you beaten up? What do you mean? Who beat you up? Are you all right? Has anyone attacked you? He said, Tanya. 2 skinheads walked past. Skinheads, I said? What's a skinhead? Even I didn't know at that time frame what a skinhead was. I knew about neo-Nazis, but I didn't know that they were called skinheads. He said, rolling his eyes at me, they're neo-Nazis. They're called skinheads when they shave all their heads and they've got all the, Hitler symbols and that shaved on their head. I said, how do you know they were skinheads? They might have just been 2 idiots with shaved heads. Tanya, they were covered in Nazi tattoos. Oh, I said. He said they even had the boots, the bother boots, the shit-kicking boots. Oh, I said. He said they were dressed, Oh, some little bug went past. They were full tripper, dressed as skinheads walking around. I said, oh, so why are you so distressed then? He said, Tanya, as they walked past us, I shouldn't laugh, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny. You had to be there, I guess. As they're walking past us, he says, Jasmine turns and looks, stares at them for a moment and points and says, Nazis! There's Nazis! And I'm like, how did she know they were Nazis? I don't even know what a skinhead is. And Jared said, I don't know. How does she know they were Nazis? I said, I haven't taught her anything about neo-Nazis. I've had no reason to. We're Jewish, but we don't know. They've had no exposure to neo-Nazis until now. Jared said, the 2 men turned and looked at Jasmine and looked at Crystal, and then they looked at me. He said, and I just stood there. I thought they were going to absolutely beat the living crap out of me. And I said, what did you do? He said, I just stood there, said to the children, don't move, just stand still. Mummy's coming soon. It's funny, but I'm like, what was Mummy going to do? Me. Well, you know what Mummy would have done. Mummy would have put the fear of God into the skinheads if they'd started anything. But I think they must have just been just as shocked as he was that this 7-year-old child was pointing at them, calling them Nazis, which they were neo-Nazis, they were white supremacists, they were skinheads. So she was quite correct. I said, what did you do? He said, I just said, Jasmine, shh, shut up, shut the fuck up, say no more, don't move, make no false moves, do nothing. He said, I'm that frightened. He said, I think I'm going to be sick. I said, all right, I'll hold on to the children. You go to the bathroom now and just, wash your face and calm down. Everything's okay. We were lucky that they weren't, out looking to actually attack people. I said, they probably had kids up there too in the playground, the amusement area. Jared said, no, they were on their own. I went, well, we don't know that for a fact. If they're up here, they probably were looking for their kids. I said, don't worry about it. I said, we'll just stay well away, So he calmed down eventually, but for months afterwards, he would look at Jasmine and he'd say, you tried to get me killed. And she would just nod and laugh because she had no idea what he was actually talking about. And I had to quietly explain to her that when we're out in public, it's not polite to point at people and, make judgments about their appearance or what they're dressed in or how they look. And she said, but Mummy, they were Nazis. It's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. And I still to this day don't know how she knew. It's actually quite incredible, actually. And because Crystal's standing there too beside her, had no idea either what was going on. She was very insightful, little Jasmine. There were a few occasions that she kind of got us into potential danger. I can't remember what the other occasion was. It will come back to me. Anyway, that was intense, really intense. And Jared said, my whole life flashed before me, Tanya. Because it was up at the top of the building, all it would have taken was him to push him right off the balcony and plummet to the bottom. He could have died, I don't think they had any intentions, but you just don't know. So he said, my whole life flashed before me and all I could think of is here I am trying to be, in charge of the children while you're in the ladies' toilet, oblivious to what's going on. He said, it's a big responsibility. And I went, well, it's like you kept them calm and you remained calm and you didn't engage and everything's fine. But anyway, that's my little segue about fascists running around and children in all innocence not even realise the enormity of it, getting you potentially in danger situations. My lungs are playing up in the last couple of days. I don't know what that's about. Probably the sudden drop in temperature. From 37 down to 22 this morning. It's a big change. Right, we'll continue on with the story, people of Earth. Coming from the calm, slow, sunlit days of Corfu, our arrival in London late in the evening was a shattering experience. So many people were at the station that we did not know, all hurrying to and fro, grey-faced and worried. The most incomprehensible language that the porters spoke, and London aglitter with lights and churning with people. The taxi nosing its way through Piccadilly like a beetle through a firework display. The cold air that made your breath float like a web of smoke in front of your mouth as you talked, so that you felt like a character in a cartoon strip. Eventually the taxi drew up outside the fake soot-encrusted Corinthian columns of Balaclava mansions. We got our luggage into the hotel with the aid of an elderly, bow-legged Irish porter, but there was no one to greet us, so apparently The telegram signalling our arrival had gone astray. The young lady, we were informed by the porter, had gone to her meeting, and Miss Hughes and the old lady had gone to feed the dogs. "What did he say, dear?" asked Mother when he had left the room, for his accent was so thick that it sounded almost as though he were talking a foreign language. I said that Margot had gone to a meeting and that Cousin Prue and Aunt Fan were feeding the dogs. "What can he mean?" said Mother, bewildered. "What meeting has Margot gone to? What dogs is he talking about?" I said I did not know, but from what I had seen of London, what it needed was a few more dogs around. "Well," said Mother, inexpertly putting a shilling, synchronicity. Well, that's not a shilling though, it's a sixpence. Calm your farm, Tanya Arons. In the meter and lighting the gas fire. "I suppose we'll just have to make ourselves comfortable and wait until they come back." We had waited an hour when suddenly the door burst open and Cousin Prue rushed in, arms outstretched, crying, "Louise! Louise! Louise!" like some strange marsh bird. She embraced us both, her slow, dark eyes glowing with love and excitement. Her beautiful face, delicately scented, was soft as a pansy as I kissed her dutifully. "I began to think that you were never coming," she said. "Mummy is on her way up. She finds the stairs trying, poor dear. Well, now, don't you both look well? You must tell me everything. Do you like this hotel, Louise? It's so cheap and convenient, but full of the most peculiar people." A gentle wheezing sound made itself heard through the open door. "Ah, there's Mummy," cried Prue. "Mummy, Mummy, Louise is here." Through the door appeared my great Aunt Fan. At first glance she looked, I thought rather uncharitably, like a walking tent. She was enveloped in a rusty red tweed suit of incredible style and dimensions. It made her look like a russet red pyramid of tweed. On her head she wore a somewhat battered velveteen hat of the style that pixies are reputedly wont to use. Her spectacles, through which her eyes stared owlishly, glittered. "Louise," she cried, throwing her arms wide and casting her eyes up as though Mother were some divine apparition. "Louise and Gerald, you have come." Mother and I were kissed and embraced heartily. This was not the feathery, petal-soft embrace of Cousin Prue. This was a hearty, rib-cracking embrace and a firm kiss that left your lips feeling bruised. There's a magpie digging in the ground for worms. It's a happy little magpie. Happy little magpie. I'm dressed in similar colorations as his feathers. I'm a happy little magpie too. Also, I like shiny, shiny things, so there is that. "I am so sorry we weren't here to greet you, Louise dear," said Prue, "but we weren't sure when you were arriving and we had the dogs to feed." "What dogs?" asked Mother. "Why, my Bedlington puppies, of course," said Prue. "Didn't you know? Mummy and I have become dog breeders." She gave a coy, tinkling laugh. But you had something else last time, said Mother. Goats or something, wasn't it? Oh, we've still got those, said Aunt Fan, and my bees and the chickens. But Prudence here thought it would be a good thing to start dog breeding. She's got such a head for business. I really think it's a paying concern, Louise dear, said Prue earnestly. I bought Tinker Bell and then Lucy Bell, and then Tiny Bell, interrupted Aunt Fan. And Tiny Bell, said Prue. And Lucy Bell, said Aunt Fan. Oh, Mummy, do be quiet. I've already said Lucy Bell. And there's Tinker Bell too, said Aunt Fan. Mummy is a little hard of hearing, said Prue, unnecessarily. And they have all had puppies. I brought them up to London to sell, and at the same time we have been keeping an eye on Margot. Yes, where is Margot? Asked Mother. Prue tiptoed over to the door and closed it softly. She's at a meeting, dear, she said. I know, but what sort of meeting? Asked Mother. Prue glanced around nervously. A spiritualist meeting, she hissed. And then there's Lucy Bell, said Aunt Fan. Oh, Mummy, do be quiet. Spiritualist meeting, said Mother. What on earth she's gone to a spiritualist meeting for? To cure her fatness and her acne, said Prue. But mark my words, no good will come of it. It's an evil power. Little do they know, people of Earth. Although I have a segue here. I know, she's at it again. I used to like to go to spiritualist church meetings, church services, even though I'm Jewish. I was raised as a spiritualist as a child, and as you know from my strange and sometimes unplanned examples of mediumship, every now and then the spirits come to communicate with me. So even though I'm Jewish, I'm very well connected to the spiritual world. And back in the day, also in the 90s, early 90s, as I realised that my marriage was over, but I was still remaining married, I was still hanging on for the sake of my kids, only thereby damaging them even further, by the way. I started taking myself off to spiritualist church services, just more out of interest and curiosity, just to see if anyone would pick up on any spirits that might be around me and might be able to communicate how best for me to move forward in life, given that everything that I knew and loved was crumbling all around me. So I think it was some years later. Yes, it was much later. In the late 90s, trying to think now. Yes, it was in the late 90s, early 2000s when I went back to the spiritualist church, and I went to the main one here in Mean Street, M-E-I-N Street, in German pronounced Main, but anyway, here they call it Mean Street. Anyway, I went to that particular church, and I was wanting to do spiritual development, which is learning how to open up and communicate with my spirit guides and learn how to channel and do mediumship. So I went there for some months. The spiritual development course, I think, was 6-month long course. I must have been going there. I don't think I went the full 6 months. And I didn't continue with the development because I actually got scared and shut it all down, because not because it was evil. Spiritualism, like any other religion or faith or practice, is not evil, but there's good and evil in every organisation, in every church, temple, mosque, right across the cosmos. There's, you get lunatics attracted to religious or spiritual spaces. And there are people who are by nature, for want of a better word, evil. But they're moonlighting as, oh, we're in this spiritual space and this religious space, and we're good, and we make decisions for you that, they present as good, but are actually control dynamics and control dramas. And, there's narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths in every sphere of influence. So you come across them. I came across many in my Brisbane Jewish community, unfortunately for me and my daughters, but it is what it is. So anyway, I thought, oh well, I surely can't be any less safe by going to a Christian spiritualist service. And I don't adhere to the Christian side of the philosophy because it's not my religion, but I would politely sit through the services and participate, singing whatever hymns that they were presenting, and observing the fully gifted and talented mediums giving overheads when they pick you out in the audience and give you messages from your past family members or your guides or whoever feels it's important to communicate with you, former friends, lovers, whoever's passed. Sometimes they even pass on messages from people's pets. Bless. Wouldn't mind doing that, actually, going and seeing if any of my pets came through. But, well, can't really be bothered now, can I? If they want to talk to me, they come to me directly now, as you've seen on this channel in recent months. It's been a bit astonishing, quite frankly, at times. So anyway, but this particular service at that church in Main Street, I just had arrived. It was the beginning before it even got started, actually. And I have with my complex PTSD issues, I have a very intense anxiety about going to, public spaces or social places. It's something I have to kind of push down and kind of suppress, but I'll be sitting in a new venue or a new space, a bundle of bloody nerves, and I try to contain it because it's my stuff. It's got nothing to do with the venue or, for example, if I go to even new venues for dancing, I have the same feeling of absolute bloody terror, and I have to just quell it because it's not always rational. It's from years and years of abuse and being threatened and harassed and sexually abused and the whole gamut. So I have to kind of remind myself I'm in a new venue, I don't know the people here, but I'm present here, and I just have to tell myself, just go with the flow. So in the context of the spiritual church there, I'm sitting down and it's filling up with people all around me, and I'm looking around and people are looking at me because they're obviously taking notice that I'm new and they don't know me, and there was a sort of look of kind of, suspicion and a little bit of antipathy, which I ignored because, you go somewhere new, you go to anywhere that you're a regular at, someone new comes up, it's human nature to check them out and perhaps smile, make them feel welcome, would have been nice, or just observe carefully, because we're herd animals and we're used to being under reasonable threat, I guess. It's just instinct to vigilantly scan your environment, isn't it? So anyway, I looked around this church hall and with all the seating, and it started filling up with quite a few people. Most of the people didn't look all that happy to be there. They were all looking a bit glum, really, and I was nervous with my anxiety being, I hadn't been there for quite some years, since the 90s. And so I was sitting there feeling very nervous, and they made an announcement that the readers, the lay leaders for the day would be, they always have 2 or 3 mediums leading the service. And so they announced the name of the lady, an elderly lady, and I can't remember her name now. She's going to lead the service for the day, and I nodded politely, Anyway, suddenly, and this was actually astonishing people of Earth, because I had never experienced being actually attacked, what felt like a physical attack by something non-human or invisible before. That's not strictly true. I had sensations of being touched on the shoulder before I left the unit complex in November 1996. I went to visit one of the other people in the units, and she had a medium there, and I said, she did a reading on me. I said, someone is pinching on my shoulders and pressing down. She said, I'll tell them to back off. If their energy is too powerful, they're not allowed to hurt you in any way, but they don't always realise their strength. She said, because they don't have bodies, that they don't realise that you can actually feel it as physically painful. So she said, you have to ask them to back off. So that's the only other time that I felt physically invisible hands on me. So I'm sitting in this church auditorium, and the service hasn't even begun yet when I feel this hand on my throat, and I thought, at first I thought, it's my anxiety, my throat's closing up, it easily does, also with my asthma. And so I sat there thinking, it's just nerves. But I could feel like fingers squeezing tighter and tighter on my throat. And I actually turned bright red, and I was feeling quite distressed, because by that time frame I had already been strangled back in 1995 and again in 1999 and when did Terry strangle me? 1997. Was it 97 or 98? I think it was 1998. And the third strangulation was David Davidson in 1999. So this is 2000. I thought, maybe it's a trauma response and my body's remembering the strangulations. But I thought, I have no reason to have that physical sensation of being strangled. I'm in a spiritualist church with people who are spiritual and believe in heaven and angels and spirit guides and guardian spirits and the spirit world. Why on earth would me as a newcomer be attacked and strangled? And of course the sensation's getting more and more intense. I'm like starting to choke. And a few people even looked at me, wondered what was going on, and I couldn't say anything because you just look crazy. Even in a spiritualist church, you look like you're saying you're all evil and you're trying to kill me. I didn't want to give that implication because that's not true. But there was someone in that church on that day didn't like me, whether it was a physical person that was directing that entity to me, or whether like an attachment to a physical person, or whether it was a person sending it as a kind of a biomorphic thought form. But I was receiving the energy as a hand on my throat, literally choking me. So anyway, I just said a quick protection prayer and took a few puffs of my Ventolin, thinking maybe it's kind of a weird asthma attack, which is, you feel like you're choking at times, but I've never had the feeling of hands on physically on my throat like that by an invisible entity. And I was actually quite shaken, and I thought maybe I should get up and leave. But my innate defiance kicked in. I thought, no, fuck you. Whoever's doing this, you will not intimidate me, and you will not bully me out of coming in all, good faith, clean and clear, with no nasty negative intentions, to participate in a spiritualist service. Participate as in sitting there listening and observing and listening to the messages being given to other people. Anyway, interestingly, to my astonishment, I was indeed given a message. And the message was, no, that was after my mother's death when that happened. So that was another time I went there. So no, it's a separate story. But another time I went there, which was after my mother's death, when I was still going through the awful will dispute. I think I wanted to go to find out how long this awful will dispute was going to go on for, and how long I was going to be fucking tortured with that for. Anyway, I went along there on that occasion, and I got given an overhead, which is when the medium picks a person out in the audience and sends them messages. Anyway, the medium got quite cross with me because she said to me, I have a message from your mother. I said, I don't wish to communicate with that entity, sorry. Of course, normal people who have not had parents like mine cannot possibly comprehend the amount of trauma and triggering it might be for suddenly having one's dead mother, who's been nothing but savage to you all their life, suddenly jump in and want to communicate with you. And also, to be fair, you have to be conscious that it may not be your actual mother. It could be any spirit pretending to be that person. But anyway, she said, well, what are you here for if you don't want a message from your mother? She said, I'm the medium, I'm the channel. I don't get to decide which spirits come through with messages. And it's actually a great honour to be chosen to be given a message to. Everyone in the church turns and looks at me. And this is true. It is considered an honour. I said, I mean no disrespect, I said, to you personally, but you cannot possibly comprehend what it means for me to accept a message from my dead mother. And then she kind of did a little shake and reframed it in her mind that I wasn't rejecting her mediumship per se. And she said to me, your mother says that, how did she put it? Your mother says that you were estranged for quite some time towards the end of her life. I said, yes, 10 years. And she said, yes. And she says, and my mother, because my mother's a narcissist, and I knew it was my mother then because her personality was completely intact. She had not evolved in the 2 years since she died. She said, your mother says that she couldn't help some of her behaviours towards you. She lacked the cognition and she lacked the cognition and she lacked the comprehension of how much distress she was causing to you and her grandchildren. Well, I sat up and took notice when she actually acknowledged the grandchildren. I was like, right, I said. And I said, is this supposed to be an apology? And then the medium kind of did a little shake again and looked quite perturbed. She says, your mother says she could not have done any better or differently. She simply didn't have, was it cognition was the word? She didn't have there was another word for it. So I'm sitting there seething with rage, thinking this is beyond awful. And anyway, she said, basically, you'll get your money. It'll all come to, she didn't say you'll get your money. She said it'll all come to a resolution in September 2012, which it did. Thank the goddess for that, because 4 times during that awful evil will dispute I was suicidal. It was that foul, and the con artist stepsisters were that foul, and the lawyers were just money grabbing. It was vitriolic and evil and a cesspit. And by the way, I had no support from my darling daughters then either, but once that will dispute was resolved, the hand came out for money straight away, didn't it? Anyway, I don't resent that, because we were put through so much torture when we were living in Waterford West for 18 months that I thought, well, it's the only inheritance they're going to get, because there'll be nothing when I die. I'm living in reasonable dire fucking poverty. So I, gave them quite a large percentage of my small inheritance, by the way. But anyway, it all came to a resolution then, but it was torture, absolute torture. But I remember that medium being so cross that I didn't want to accept messages from my mother. And I said, no, you can't possibly understand that this is unacceptable for me to receive from that entity at this point in time. But it was the closest my mother ever came to apologising me. She did indeed apologise, a better apology, some years later when I was doing a trance drumming, channeling on my own, under my own merits, which I found interesting. But, at that point in time, my mother had been dead over 10 years. Well, it's taken 10 years for her to evolve and gain enough spiritual maturity, even in the, afterlife, to have the decency to actually apologise. But at the end of the day, although it's nice to have an apology, it doesn't change the cumulative damage that was done to me and my daughters, by the way. It doesn't change anything until, my time comes and I leave this mortal coil and are set free of all those horror attachments. It won't change anything. And, I had to find a form of forgiveness, not for my perpetrators, because to forgive them is to set them free of all their accountability and responsibility for their actions, but to give myself for being an innocent child at the mercy of demonic monsters and not have the ability to set myself free of it. And then as an adult woman, having that pattern repeat and repeat and repeat, and still somehow, even after 30 years of therapy and forgiveness practices, still not to be free of it. It still feels very much to this day a hell loop that gets revisited on a groove with monotonous regularity. So that's where we are. But I went into that segue because I want to particularly point out this was the prejudice of other Christian or other religious people in the day that decided that all spiritualists are evil, which is simply not true. And although there was something or someone evil present in that church that day, because after the fingers kept tightening around my neck, I realised it was no longer a manifestation of anxiety, but an actual physical attack, physical and spiritual attack, psychic attack. I realised, no, there's someone in this church has decided, just based on how I look or just my mere presence, tried to scare me away from coming here. Anyway, as a consequence, I didn't go back there. I didn't go back till a long time later after my mother's death, more out of curiosity to see if it happened again, quite frankly. And, I've spoken to a few people, other mediums, psychics over the years that have gone to that church, and they said that they too had felt that there was something unwelcoming at least and threatening at worst on a few occasions that they'd gone there too. So, it's alarming. It's alarming when a church gets infested with evil spirits, particularly when that is the scope of the church practices by virtue of its religious beliefs that they're giving readings to quite often vulnerable and emotionally distressed people looking for connectivity with their beloved ones. Who comes through? My worst enemy ever in my entire life, a woman in whose womb I did grow and got cut out from, but nevertheless still your mother. There's still that powerful bond, whether your mother is good, bad or indifferent, still your mother. It's hard to wrap your mind around sometimes. Anyway, but mark my words, no good will come of it. It's an evil power, said Prue. I could see Mother beginning to get alarmed. But I don't understand, she said. I sent Margot home to see that doctor. What's his name? I know you did, dear, said Prue. Then after she came to this hotel, she fell into the grasp of that evil woman. What evil woman? Said Mother, now considerably alarmed. The goats are well too, said Aunt Fan, but their milk yield is down a little this year. Oh, Mummy, do shut up, hissed Prue. I mean that evil woman, Mrs. Haddock. Haddock? Haddock? Said Mother, bewildered. Her train of thought was always liable to be interrupted if anything culinary was mentioned. She's a medium, my dear, said Prue, and she's got her hooks on Margot. She's told Margot that she's got a guide. A guide? Said Mother feebly. What sort of guide? I could see in her distraught condition that she was now beginning to think Margot had taken up mountaineering or some similar occupation. A spirit guide, said Prue. It's called Mawake. He's supposed to be a Red Indian. I have 10 hives now, said Aunt Fan proudly. We get twice as much honey. Mother, be quiet, said Prue. I don't understand, said Mother plaintively. Why isn't she going to the doctor for her injections? Because Mawaki told her not to, said Prue triumphantly. 3 seances ago, he said, according to Margot, and of course the whole thing comes through Mrs. Haddock, so you can't trust it for a moment. According to Margot, Mawake said she has to have no more punctures. Punctures? Said Mother. Well, I suppose it's Red Indian for injections, said Prue. It's nice to see you again, Louise, said Aunt Fan. I think we ought to have a cup of tea. "That's a very good idea," said Mother faintly. "I'm not going down there to order tea, Mummy," said Prue, glancing at the door as if behind it were all the fiends of hell. "Not when they're having a meeting." "Why, what happens?" asked Mother. "And some toast would be nice," said Aunt Fan. "Oh, Mummy, do be quiet," said Prue. "You have no idea what happens at these meetings, Louise. Mrs. Haddock goes into a trance and then becomes covered with ectoplasm." Holy shit. If she gets covered with ectoplasm, people of Earth, she's the real deal. You very, very rarely see that. Very rarely. They used to fake it with some kind of tulle or netting, but if you see the real ectoplasm, you're dealing with a real physical medium. It's called physical mediumship when you can produce that, or that gets produced around you when you're in trance. Let's put it that way. It's not so much the person producing it, but a manifestation of how their connection with the spirit realm. "Ectoplasm," said Mother. "What's ectoplasm?" "I've got a pot of my own honey in my room," said Aunt Fan. "I'm sure you will enjoy it, Louise. So much purer than these synthetic things you buy now." Indeed, there's nothing worse than synthetic fucking honey, or synthetic butter, or synthetic meat, or synthetic human beings. Just saying. "It's a sort of stuff that mediums produce," said Prue. "It looks like, well, it looks like, sort of like, I've never actually seen it, but I'm told that it looks like brains." Don't think it does, but anyway. "Then they make trumpets fly about and things." That can happen. Or you can hear trumpets at the very least. It makes me feel tempted to go back, actually. Where in Brisbane can I go to see real mediumship with a real medium who knows their stuff and can produce ectoplasm? And there's a special word for it when they manifest objects, usually coins or jewellery, physical jewellery. There's one medium, I've forgotten his name, used to vomit it up, from literally purge it from inside his body somehow. That's astonishing. That would actually probably give me a little bit of the creeps, to be honest. I don't think I'd like to see that. But he would bring up gold coins and jewellery, and that's an amazing gift. Not a pleasant one, but an amazing one. Anyway, I tell you, my dear, I never go into the lower regions of the hotel when they are holding a meeting. Fascinated though I was by the conversation, I felt the chance of seeing a woman called Mrs. Haddock covered with brains with a couple of trumpets floating about was too good to miss, so I volunteered to go down and order tea. Good on you, Jerry. Good on you for being broad-minded and fearless and interested and curious. I would have done the same. But then, to be fair, I was raised going to Christian spiritualist churches during much of my childhood, because after my parents' separation, my father took me on my fortnightly access visits to every Christian spiritualist church there was in Melbourne, and also in Wellington when we returned to New Zealand. So there was that. That was my childhood. So I'm a believer, partly because of osmosis and partly because all my near deaths as a child taught me, there is more than just this one dimension, people of Earth. There's so much, much more. And yet astonishingly, the gods keep me here, planet Earth, in this physical form, and this mind, body and spirit, and bring me to the brink and remind me regularly that eventually my time will come and I will transition this physical isness. But it's a bit odd. It's a bit odd how many times I've been brought to just that. I call it the waiting room of death, where I wasn't allowed to proceed further and was sent back each time. Anyway, my mother had 2 near-death experiences during her lifetime too. One was under the influence of ether when she was having the cesarean with me, and the other one, so she hadn't technically died in that instance. It could argue it was a hallucination, but she must have clinically died because she heard a chiming bell telling her to go back and to remember that there's life after death. The second event was when she was on the dentist's chair when I was about 9 or 10. She was having all her dentures, teeth taken out and dentures, and they must have knocked her out for the removal of the teeth. And she actually had a massive asthma attack, probably from the anxiety, and did actually clinically die. In fact, she was dead for 2 minutes. And it was the nurse, the dental nurse, the dental assistant. My mother said the last words I heard was the dentist freaking out, going, "Oh my God, oh my God." And she could hear the nurse saying, "CPR, CPR, call an ambulance." And it was the nurse that took over and was giving CPR, and an ambulance was indeed called. But yeah, she had a profound near-death experience at that, on the dentist chair. What a place to drop dead. It sounds a bit cynical of me, but it's an unusual place to die. Don't usually die at the dentist. You feel terribly traumatized sometimes, but you don't usually die of the event. But anyway, she was brought back to life and carried on basically being a terrible mother, even though she'd had this profound spiritual experience. I think it would have made her a better person, but alas, no. So, good and evil in the Garden of Gethsemane, just to make a New Testament quote, I suppose. Cynicism and my inherent defiance and sardonism, because it is what it is, people of Earth. Anyway, Gerald continues writing. However, to my disappointment, I saw nothing in the lower regions of the hotel to resemble remotely Cousin Prudence's description, but I did manage to get a tray of tea brought up by the Irish porter. We were sipping this, and I was endeavouring to explain to Aunt Fan what ectoplasm was when Margot arrived, carrying a large cabbage under one arm, accompanied by a dumpy little woman with protruding blue eyes and wispy hair. "Mother," said Margot dramatically, "you've come." "Yes, dear," said Mother grimly, and not a moment too soon, apparently. "This is Mrs. Haddock," said Margot. "She's absolutely marvellous." It became immediately apparent that Mrs. Haddock suffered from a strange affliction. For some obscure reason, she seemed to be incapable of breathing while talking. The result was that she would gabble, all her words latched together like a daisy chain, and would then, when her breath ran out, pause and suck it in, making a noise that sounded like Wow. Now she said to Mother, I'm delighted to meet you, Mrs. Durrell. Of course, my spirit guide informed me of your coming. I do hope you had a comfortable journey. She's asthmatic, is what they're describing. You know, that dreadful Josh on Polarity, who I've stopped following his channel because he just constantly puts Jew baiting and Jew hating videos up, and I'm not going to subscribe to that. Sorry. But another thing he does, another thing he does is he makes fun of Ross Coulthart, who any moron with any ounce of basic human mental capacity can observe is, like me, a fellow asthmatic or has some kind of breathing difficulties. So he sits there on his channel and he mocks him going, oh, there's Ross. Like, he thinks that's funny, to make fun of people who actually have quite serious, potentially life-threatening illnesses, to mock and deride someone for their mode of speech when it's actually linked up with breathing. And we all need to breathe, people of Earth. Even Joshy baby needs to breathe, take up his space, swanning around Bali currently, being a douche. I used to like him, and I did enjoy many of his videos, but then I realised all he is doing is regurgitating each week whatever some other channels, Ross Coulthart obviously, or other channels have produced. Then he takes bits and pieces from it, and then he sits there and acts like it's his, watching it avidly. It's like it's not even his own material. So I've become disenchanted, and you know, you don't mock and deride people for having physical ailments, just saying. That's just fucking nasty. Like, you know, there's comedy, like I joke about myself being, you know, short, fat hobbit, and I might even joke about some of my anxiety and my PTSD issues and what have you, and that's fine if I'm being self-deprecating and joking about my limitations. But you don't make fun and mock and deride other people, especially other people in the same field of expertise that deserve to be treated, you know, with a measure of respect. You don't have to agree with everything they say. You don't have to agree with everything they put in their videos either. If you don't believe in UFOs, you don't have to agree with any of it. But there's no reason to be obnoxious and nasty and making fun of people for having disabilities. Why I'm freaking out just then, I heard the blip that my Apple iPhone makes. I'm not wearing my Apple iPhone, so I thought we got blipped off, but the video is still recording. But it was a definite tick. And that was pressed up against it, so it couldn't have made that sound, and it's not the same sound. Anyway, that's why I stopped to pause, because it was a strange little tick sound like my Apple Watch makes that I'm not wearing. Meh. Anyway, we'll carry on. But yes, I'm removing myself and not supporting channels where I see the presenters being particularly nasty or fascistic or just incredibly fucking gauche, people of Earth. My world's becoming smaller and smaller and smaller and shrinking because I just keep removing myself from anywhere where people are nasty and unpleasant. My time and my money and my very breath and my presence on this earth is too valuable to waste time on idiots. Just saying. That goes right across the board. right across every aspect of human endeavour. I can't believe how these people become so famous and make so much money on YouTube channels when I make no money and I only have a few. Mind you, that subscribership's grown a lot in recent months. I don't understand why actually, but thank you to my subscribers who are supporting me with my little spiritualistic Jewish rantantans. Thank you for supporting me as a woman struggling on my own on this planet. I appreciate you. It's very kind that you support me. But as I was about to say, I can't believe how much money these people are making on their YouTube channels and becoming famous for just being nasty. It's a sign of the times, isn't it? That people favour viciousness and toxicity and nastiness over people producing intelligent, interesting discourses, or in my case I'm just reading books. But you know, I was watching an interesting show. I like Jesse Michel's. He's not fallen foul of me yet. And who's the other one I'm still watching? Chris from what's the name of his podcast? It'll come to me. I watched it only yesterday. I like he does his in a skiff. And Third Eye Drops. There's a few I'm still following in the ufology world. And like I say, some of it I don't always agree with, or you know, but it's still interesting to watch and learn, gather more knowledge about, or study as the case may be. So anyway, on we go and on we go. If I have to make money though by basically prostituting myself to the masses by being vindictive and nasty to people you don't even know, you've never met, and it's just like schoolboy bullying in the schoolyard. I think that's why it creeps me out so much, because I survived a lot of bullying in my lifetime, both at school and at university when I was there for 18 months till I had to leave because it was just so beyond awful. Anyway, I hate bullies. You don't like someone, tell them to their face. But don't go on to these fucking money-grabbing, anti-cultural, fascistic fucking things like they do on these spiritual ufology channels. It's ghastly. Right. Mother, who had been intending to give Mrs. Haddock a very frigid and dignified greeting, was somewhat put off by this strange delivery. "Oh yes, did we?" she said nervously, straining her ears to understand what Mrs. Haddock was saying. "Mrs. Haddock is a spiritualist, Mother," said Margot proudly, as though she were introducing Leonardo da Vinci, or the inventor of the first aeroplane. "Really, dear?" said Mother, smiling frostily. "How very interesting." Just one moment, just going to check on my birdie boys. Oh, little Bo's asleep. Right, I have to take a deep breath because she speaks without breathing, so I have to try and replicate that. And as an asthmatic, it's not so easy for me either. Right, ready? It gives one great comfort to know that those who have gone before are still in touch with one, said Mrs. Haddock earnestly. So many people are unaware of the spirit world that lies so close. "You should have seen the puppies tonight, Margot," observed Aunt Fan. "The little tinkers had torn up all their bedding." "Mummy, do be quiet," said Prue, eyeing Mrs. Haddock as though she expected her to grow horns and a tail at any moment. "Your daughter is very lucky inasmuch as she has managed to obtain one of the better guides," said Mrs. Haddock. "How does one obtain the better guides?" "I have angels in the architecture, spinning in infinity, and let us say, hallelujah." They can be wrathful angels at times too, so we don't fuck with them, people of Earth. Don't like to call upon the angels for assistance because they are messengers of God and creator, source, however you want to frame that. I've got far better things to do than bother with little old me and my little old hobbit body. But if my angels step in, be afraid, be very afraid. They always come in when they come. Be not afraid, fear not, because they know the power of the angels overrules all the spirits, all the spirit guides, everyone. The angels come in, you're dealing with the top tier wazza. But anyway, I haven't seen my angel. Other people have, which is astonishing, people of Earth. And that's not to say that I think that energy is still with me, because I don't presume to assume that. But they have instructed me multiple times in my life to call upon them when I'm in danger, and when I have, instant results. I think that's because it was the angels that sent me back to life after the first strangulation and kept me alive so I could finish off the job of raising my children, however badly they think I did a bad job of it, which is not without merit given that we were under attack for many years, but I did the best I could given the level of poverty, trauma, despair, dissolution, and constant chronic attack from every angle, including my own government, my own family of origin, my partners at the time, their father or his family, minions, former friends. Everyone had a ride. So when the angels stepped in, it all got cleaned up. Not immediately, but astonishingly quickly, given the immensity of the trauma and abuse dynamics that were going on at the time. Right, what she said was she had managed to obtain one of the better guides, said Mrs. Haddock, rather as though Margaret had riffled through the debris before settling on her spirit counsellor. "He's called Mawake," said Margot. Pardon me, I had poffertjes for breakfast. "He's absolutely marvellous." Poffertjes are little round Dutch pancakes that I cooked up last night, and I made another batch this morning, and I need a cup of tea, people of Earth. My throat's closing up, not because of psychic attack, but just because I'm a bit dry. And this is a very long chapter, very long, by the gods. I'll have to carry on, won't I? I think I've got some water here. Yes, that will do. That's better. Right. He doesn't appear to have done you much good so far, said Mother tartly. But he has, said Margot indignantly. I've lost 3 ounces. It takes time and patience and implicit belief in the future life. My dear Mrs. Durrell, said Mrs. Haddock, smiling at Mother with sickly sweetness. Yes, I'm sure, said Mother, but I really would prefer it if Margot were under a medical practitioner one could see. As if that makes much difference, especially these days, by the gods. I don't think they meant it, said Aunt Fan. I think they're teething. Their gums get sore, you know. Mummy, we are not talking about the puppy, said Prue. We are talking about Margot's guide. That will be nice for her, said Aunt Fan, beaming fondly at Margot. The spirit world is so much wiser than many earthly being, said Mrs. Haddock. You couldn't have your daughter in better hands. Mawake was a great medicine man in his own tribe, one of the most knowledgeable in the whole of North America. And he's given me such good advice, Mother, said Margot. Hasn't he, Mrs. Haddock? No more punctures. The white girl must have no more punctures. Waha, intoned Mrs. Haddock. What he said applies to this current paradigm in 2026. No more punctures, people of Earth. None. I agree with Mawake on that one. When was this book written? In the 30s. Ahead of its time, wasn't it? Dear Goddess. Well, spirits see far, far into the distant future. Sometimes when you get the messages, you just think, what is this nonsense? None of this makes sense. It's all crazy talk. And then it comes true and you realise, oh shit, I wish I'd written that down. I wish I'd recorded that. I wish I'd listened. I wish I'd obeyed. But free will has caused a great calamity in our current space-time. Just saying. If certain people had listened to their mother that they deemed mad and worthless because I'm old and poor and not quite so socially effete as her friend that financed her play, she might have been spared all of that. Didn't listen. None of them listened. Not my circus, not my monkey. I warned you. That's my waha, a sigh of despair and complicated grief, as my doctor calls it. There you are, hissed Prue triumphantly. I told you. Have some honey, said Aunt Fan, companion. Sometimes I have trouble with my words. Companionably. By the gods. It's not like that synthetic stuff you buy in the shops nowadays. Mummy, be quiet. I still feel, Mrs. Haddock, that I would prefer my daughter to have sensible medical attention rather than this mawake. Why? If your spirit guide is giving you better medical attention and advice than a mortal living human being, I'd take the spirit guide's advice every bloody time, people of Earth. But anyway. There's 2 magpies strutting along the verge, picking up worms now. Oh, they're loving the rain, bringing little worms to the surface. The circle of life, people of Earth. The circle of life. One day you're a happy little worm writhing around in the mud. Next minute you're in the belly of a very quirky magpie. Hello, magpies! Well, there you go. We must strive to be happy regardless of what happens in the external world. Not in denial, but strive to manifest our own joy and equilibrium, and hold your line, and no more punctures. None. They'll keep terrorising you with more and more diseases and tell you that you're going to die, and the irony is everyone dies eventually, except for the Tanya. So far so good, against my own will sometimes, but even so, well, one day even the Tanya shall eventually die. Comes to us all eventually, at the appointed time, orchestrated and ordained, and well known and recognised by the angels or the gods or the energy that implanted my soul into this body. Only they get to decide when my time is. It's a terrible, terrifying thought, actually, having survived even a suicide attempt, which was not my plan at all, but here we are, survived to live out this life surrounded by so much evil and enmity, even coming from my own bloodlines. It's terrifying and chilling. But on we go. Life can and will get better. And do you know why? It comes from within here. I decide how my world is going to continue to manifest. I'm not participating in the shit show that's being presented to me on a daily basis. It's not my reality. It's not my choosing. You choose it. Clean up on aisle 5. If everyone thought like me, that we can choose our own reality and co-create a better life for ourselves and our world, we wouldn't be living this reality right now. But to be fair, there was a lot of interference. CERN smashing the particle colliders together. Nuclear leaks from Fukushima and the Pacific atolls. Glyphosate, DDT, COVID vaccines. There's been a lot of interference in our pristine DNA and our existence as living human beings on this planet. So it's not all just a case of wishing it was better. You have to build back better for real this time, not with AI overlords or corporatocracies or greedy billionaires or idiots that want to migrate to Mars and all the other evil shit that's going on in our world. You have to go within and ask yourself, your soul, what kind of life you want to have, and start building it back better. Heal what can be healed and let go of the rest. Mama T has spoken. Oh, Mother, you're so narrow-minded and Victorian, said Margot in exasperation. My dear Mrs. Dole, You must learn to trust the great influences of the spirit world that are, after all, only trying to help and guide us. Wah, said Mrs. Haddock. I feel that if you came to one of our meetings, you would be convinced of the great powers of good that our spirit guides have. Wah. I prefer to be guided by my own spirit. Thank you very much, said Mother with dignity, and there is great merit in that, I might add. Having the confidence and self-belief to trust in your own innate soul and make right choices for your body, mind and spirit integrity. The trouble with spiritualism, like any other religious doctrine or ideology, is, I'll be quite honest here about that, people get addicted to it and they start following leaders who are addicted to their own power and who think that their communication with the spirit world somehow makes them superior to other people, who then send entities to choke newcomers to their church or other devices, just as one example. Or in the case of my Jewish community, who entirely drove away other Jewish families based on their own snobbishness and elitism. Did that many times. Gary, I won't say his full name, but everyone knows who Gary is, turned our reform progressive temple into a conservative shul and then started being very elitist. Drove away men, often Israeli families. How obnoxious is that? Israeli born Jews, born in the Holy Land, in Israel. He was driving them away from our small Jewish community. Who the fuck does that? That is the most profound evil of all. Someone who's actually Jew, not just by birth, but by thousands of years of heritage, drove them away. That's when I realised, I thought, what am I participating in by belonging to this cesspit of evil? So I walked away. I walked away, people of Earth. I hate bullies, and I hate bigots, and I hate elitists. Got no right to drive fellow Jews away from practicing their faith and teaching it to their children, even if their wives might not be Jewish. And in Orthodoxy, their children aren't considered Jewish, but in the Reform movement, their children are indeed Jews. To then just bully them and drive them away, what? Because they don't drive the latest Lexus? That elitist snobbery used to make me vomit a little bit in my mouth, to be honest. And they all looked down on me, the single mother with 2 children being traumatised and harried and vilified and attacked in every aspect of our being, looked down on us because I had a German mother. That was their excuse for a while, and then it was, she's divorced. Tried to cancel my elder daughter's bat mitzvah because I couldn't afford the fees for the bat mitzvah. Tried to cancel it. My rabbi had to blackmail them with taking it to every Jewish newspaper in the known world, showing how they treat the equivalent of the widow and the orphan, the poor and disenfranchised Tanya Aarons. Had to blackmail them. It's a fucking disgrace. And I still went through with that bat mitzvah and gave Jasmine hers as well. But when Jasmine's came 18 months later, I actually said to them verbally, don't think for one moment you're going to start that shit again that you tried to do to my daughter Crystal. They just looked at me like this. They didn't know that I was informed quietly what went on in the background. Assholes they were. So yes, when I call upon my angels, Look busy, motherfuckers. I don't care what religion you are, what path you follow, what sect, what doctrine, what dogma. The angels are in the architecture, spinning in infinity, and they see all. And they have a way of cleaning up on aisle 5, especially if I ask them politely, if I see that there's some seeping cesspit that needs to be dealt with. Unfortunately, I was not able to prevent the COVIDian madness, which was global, and there's something really much, much bigger at play that we're still seeing the fallout of all of that. But sometimes my angels are dark angels. They're not always completely of the light. And if they come to clean up, shivering you jocks, me hearties. But anyway, it sounds crazy. People probably watching me right now going, that woman is off her nut. And you're entitled to your opinion. But there are others who've come to me and said, I saw your angel and he's 9 feet tall with a wingspan 12 feet. Who are you? And I just say, nobody and no one. Just me, struggling my way through life every day in every way. That woman said, oh, I don't know who you are, but I've never seen anything like it. That's how I knew that someone who refuses to take me from this mortal coil wants me here for a reason, and someone, capital S, can and will come to my defence when it's necessary. And I don't call on that someone unless I really think it's serious, because it's not for me to waste the time, the intentionality, the energy of supernal beings. I'm a mere mortal in a mere body living on planet Earth trying to get along like everyone else. So I don't care if people deem me mad. I know what is true and what is real because I've lived it, people of Earth. I've lived it and I've survived much of it. And until the day I can no longer survive it for whatever reason, I will stick to my truth and my reality. Blessed be the Holy One, author of life, the true judge. Amen. Vasila. I want to cry now. Let me just take a breath. My whole body's gone on fire. The emotion is just burning through me. I feel like I'm going to faint actually. I won't faint, but it's a nervous system response. All right, here we go. We'll carry on with the story. I prefer to be guided by my own spirit, thank you very much, said Mother with dignity. Honey isn't what it used to be, said Aunt Fan, who had been giving the matter some thought. You are just prejudiced, Mother, said Margot. You're condemning a thing without even trying. I feel sure that if you could persuade your mother to attend one of our meetings, wah, said Mrs. Haddock, she would find a whole new world opening up before her. Yes, Mother, said Margot. You must come to a meeting. I'm sure you'd be convinced. The things you see and hear. After all, there are no bricks without fire. I could see that Mother was suffering an inward struggle. For many years she had been deeply interested in superstitions, folk magic, witchcraft and similar subjects. And now the temptation to accept Mrs. Haddock's offer was very great. I find that interesting that she believed in all those other subjects but not in spiritualism, because it's part of that kind of lore, L-O-R-E, and subject matter. It's a strange prejudice to have. Maybe she was afraid to find out or have connectivity with her spirit people. I think that's what people fear, really. It's that, you know, if they open up and they communicate, that people will deem them crazy. And it's a real manifestation. Some people do go a bit crazy, like I say, go on power trips or egomaniacal sprees and become quite evil with it, quite frankly. It's a fine line to keep equilibrium. If you get too addicted to something or too obsessed with something, it becomes unhealthy. You have to be able to move in and out of that world and remain in the real world, and not buy into all the bullshit of the real world either, with all its bigotry and elitism and prejudices. Just do a little tap dance. One foot in both worlds. Shimmy shake. Do the mosh. Flip it all off. What belongs to you remains. What doesn't gets sloughed off. It's like that, people of Earth. They even tried to prevent me from doing my mosh, because there was great power in it, and they were afraid of it, people of Earth. Little old lady, maintaining her equilibrium and her power. They were and still are afraid of it, which tells me more about them than anything it could ever say about me. Their own atrophy and evil and ignorance and control dramas and abuse dynamics, none of which I subscribe to. Verminous it was. That was a man I loved very much. Fuck. Well, never mind. Wasn't the first time I've been fooled, and it won't be the last. There was nothing I wanted more at that time, at that moment, than to see Mrs. Haddock covered with brains and with trumpets flying round her head. It's not how it works. It's not brains, people of Earth. This is how stupid people really are. Anyway, well, said Mother, undecided, we'll see. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm sure that once, because there's no breaks, I'm sure that once we break through the barrier for you, we'll be able to give you a lot of help and guidance. Wow, said Mrs. Haddock. Oh yes, said Margot. Mawake is simply wonderful. One would have thought she was talking about her favourite film star. We are having another meeting tomorrow evening here in the hotel. Wow, said Mrs. Haddock. And I do hope that both you and Margot will attend. Wow. She gave us a pallid smile, as though reluctantly forgiving us our sins, patted Margot on the cheek, and left. Really, Margot? Said Mother, as the door closed behind Mrs. Haddock. You do make me cross." "Oh, Mother, you are so old-fashioned," said Margot. "That doctor wasn't doing me any good with his injections anyway, and my wake is working miracles." "Miracles?" snorted Mother scornfully. "You look exactly the same size to me." "Clover," said Aunt Fan through a mouthful of toast. "It's supposed to be the best, although I prefer heather myself." "I tell you, dear," said Prue, "this woman's got a grip on you. She's malignant. Be warned before it's too late." "All I ask is that you just simply come to a meeting and see," said Margot. "And never," said Prue, shuddering. "My nerves wouldn't stand it." "It's interesting, too, that they have to have bumblebees to fertilise the clover," observed Aunt Fan. "Well," said Mother, "I'm much too tired to discuss it now. We will discuss it in the morning." "Can you help me with my cabbage?" asked Margot. "Do what?" inquired Mother. "Help me with my cabbage," said Margot. "I have often wondered whether one should not cultivate bumblebees," said Aunt Fan thoughtfully. "What do you do with your cabbage?" inquired Mother. "She puts it on her face," hissed Prue. "Ridiculous." "It isn't ridiculous," said Margot angrily. "It's done my acne a world of good." "What? Do you mean you boil it or something?" asked Mother. "No," said Margot. "I put the leaves on my face, and you tie them on for me. My wake advised it, and it works wonders." "It's ridiculous, Louise dear." "You should stop her," said Prue, bristling like a plump kitten. "It's nothing more than witchcraft." I wonder if a comfrey poultice might help with acne, though. They might have been on the right track, quite frankly. I had quite bad acne as a teenager, but it sort of cleared up. I still get pimples. I get terrible pimples on my nose from the CPAP mask. It's always red, raw and peeling and comes up with the most awful pimples. And I had a big pimple there, which I had to deal with yesterday. I still struggle, but a lot of that's to do with, if I eat too much oily things, like I've been eating poffertjes, which I fry in olive oil. So because of olive oil, I break out in my skin and pimples. And any oil, not just olive oil, is quite a healthy oil, but any oil just gets punched out through my skin, sometimes punched out through my bowels too. It's terrible. It's quite terrible, but what can you do? I'm alive against all the odds. What can you do, people of Earth? So Margot sat in a chair and held to her large face. Oh no, hang on, I missed a bit. "Well, I'm too tired to argue about it," said Mother. "I don't suppose it can do you any harm." So Margot sat in a chair and held to her face large, crinkly cabbage leaves. She probably would have been more better off eating sauerkraut. Change the gut biome to help clear your skin sometimes. Anyway, which Mother solemnly fixed to her head with lengths of red twine. I thought she looked like some curious vegetable mummy. "It's paganism, that's what it is," said Prue. "Nonsense, Prue, you do fuss," said Margot, her voice muffled by cabbage leaves. "I sometimes wonder," said Mother, tying the last knot, "whether my family's all there." "Is Margot going to a fancy dress ball?" inquired Aunt Fan, who had watched the procedure with interest. No, Mummy, roared Prue. It's for her spots. Margot got up and groped her way to the door. Well, I'm going to bed, she said. Can't believe she slept in that cabbage leaves. Oh well. If you meet anybody on the landing, you'll give them a terrible shock, said Prue. Have a good time, said Aunt Fan. Don't stay out till all hours. I know what you young things are like. After Margot had gone, Prue turned to Mother. You see, Louise dear, I didn't exaggerate, she said. That woman is an evil influence. Margot's behaving like a mad thing. Well, said Mother, whose maxim in life was always defend your young regardless of how much in the wrong they are, I think she's being a little unwise. Unwise, said Prue. Cabbage leaves all over her face. Never doing anything that Mawake doesn't tell her to. It's not healthy. I shouldn't be a bit surprised if she didn't win first prize, said Aunt Fan, chuckling. Didn't think there'd be other people there disguised as a cabbage. The argument waxed back and forth for a considerable time, interlaced with Aunt Fan's reminiscences of fancy dress balls she had been to in India. At length, Prue and Aunt Fan left us, and Mother and I prepared for bed. I sometimes think, said Mother, as she pulled the clothes up and switched off the light, I sometimes think that I'm the only sane member of the family. The following morning, we decided to go shopping, since there were a great number of things unobtainable in Corfu that Mother wanted to purchase and take back with us. Prue said this would be an excellent plan, since she could drop her Bedlington puppies off with their new owner en route. I shall have to Google what a Bedlington breed of dog looks like. I've no idea. Surprising what I still don't know at 60 3/4 years of age. It's most surprising. Really is. Try not to think about it. So at 9 o'clock, we assembled on the pavement outside Balaclava Mansions, and we must have presented a somewhat curious sight to passers-by. Aunt Fan, presumably to celebrate our arrival, had put on a pixie hat with a large feather in it. She stood on the pavement entwined like a maypole by the leashes of the 8 Bedlington puppies that romped and fought and urinated round her. I think we'd better take a taxi, said Mother, viewing the gambolling puppies with alarm. Oh no, Louise, said Prue. Think of the expense. We can go by tube. With all the puppies? Asked Mother doubtfully. Yes, dear, said Prue. Mummy's quite used to handling them. Aunt Fan, now bound almost immobile by the puppies' leashes, had to be disentangled before we could walk down the road to the tube station. Yeast and maple syrup, said Margot. You mustn't let me forget yeast and maple syrup, Mother. Just funny because I had that on my poffertjes for breakfast. Mawake says they're excellent for acne. If you mention that man once again, I shall get seriously angry, said Mother. Our progress to the tube station was slow, since the puppies circumnavigated any obstacle in their path in different ways, and we had to pause continually to unwind Aunt Fan from the lampposts, pillar posts, and occasional passers-by. Little Tinkers, she would exclaim breathlessly after each encounter. They don't mean any harm. When we finally arrived at the ticket office, Prue had a prolonged and acrimonious argument over the price charged for the Bedlingtons. But they're only 8 weeks old, she kept protesting. You don't charge for children under 3. Eventually, however, the tickets were purchased and we made our way to the escalators to face a continuous warm blast of air from the bowels of the earth, which the puppies appeared to find invigorating. Yapping and snarling in a tangle of leads, they forged ahead, dragging Aunt Fan like a massive galleon behind them. That sounded like a bell ringing, wasn't it? It's at my front door. It was just one clunk. It was only when they saw the escalators that they began to have misgivings about what hitherto had appeared to be an exciting adventure. They did not, it appeared, like to stand on things that move, and they were unanimous in their decision. Before long we were all wedged in a tight knot at the top of the escalator, struggling with the screaming, hysterical puppies. A queue formed behind us. It shouldn't be allowed, said a frosty-looking man in a bowler hat. Dogs shouldn't be allowed on the tube. I have paid for them, panted Prue. They have as much right to travel by tube as you have. Bloody hell, observed another man. I'm in an hurry. Can't you let me get by? Little tinkers, observed Aunt Fan, laughing. They're so high-spirited at this age. Perhaps if we all picked up a puppy each, suggested Mother, getting increasingly alarmed by the muttering of the mob. At that moment, Aunt Fan stepped backwards onto the first step of the escalator and slipped and fell in a waterfall of tweeds, dragging the shrieking puppies after her. Thank God for that, said the man in the bowler hat. Perhaps now we can get on. Prue stood at the top of the escalator and peered down. Aunt Fan had now reached the halfway mark and was finding it impossible to rise owing to the weight of puppies. "Oh, Mummy, are you all right?" screamed Prue. "I'm sure she is, dear," said Mother soothingly. "Little tinkers," said Aunt Fan faintly as she was carried down the escalator. "Now that your dogs have gone, madam," said the man in the bowler hat, "would it be possible for us too to use the amenities of the station?" Prue turned, bristling to do battle. But Margot and Mother grabbed her, and they slid downwards on the staircase towards the heaving heap of tweed and Bedlingtons that was Great Aunt Fan. We picked her up and dusted her down and disentangled the puppies. Then we made our way along to the platform. The puppies now would have made a suitable subject for an RSPCA poster. Never, at the best of times, a prepossessing breed. Bedlingtons can, in moments of crisis, look more ill-used than any other dog I know. They stood uttering quavering, high-pitched yelps like miniature seagulls, shivering violently, periodically squatting down bow-legged to decorate the platform with the results of their fear. "Poor little thing," said a fat woman commiseratingly as she passed. "It's a shame the way some people treat animals." "Oh, did you hear her?" said Prue belligerently. "I've a good mind to follow her and give her a piece of my mind." Mercifully, at that moment, the train arrived with a roar and a blast of hot air and distracted everybody's attention. The effect on the puppies was immediate. 1 minute they had been standing there, shivering and wailing like a group of half-starved grey lambs, and the next minute they had taken off down the platform like a team of virile huskies, dragging Aunt Fan in their wake. "Mummy, Mummy, come back," screamed Prue as we started off in pursuit. She had forgotten Aunt Fan's method of leading the dogs, which she had explained to me at great length. Never pull on the lead because it might hurt their necks. Carrying out this novel method of dog training, Aunt Fan galloped down the back platform with the Bedlingtons streaming before her. We finally caught her and restrained the puppies just as the doors closed with a self-satisfied hiss and the train rumbled out of the station. So we had to wait in a pool of Bedlingtons for the next train to arrive. Once we finally got them in the train, the puppies' spirits suddenly revived. They fought each other with enjoyment, snarling and screeching. They wound their leads round people's legs, and one of them, in a fit of exuberance, leapt up and tore a copy of the Times from the grasp of a man who looked as though he were the manager of the Bank of England. We all had headaches by the time we arrived at our destination, with the exception of Aunt Fan, who was enchanted by the virility of the puppies. Acting on Mother's advice, we waited until there was a pause in the flow of human traffic before we attempted the escalator. And to our surprise, we got the puppies to the top with little or no trouble. They were obviously becoming seasoned travellers. "Thank goodness that's over," said Mother as we reached the top. "I'm afraid the puppies were a little bit trying," said Prue, flustered. "But then, you see, they are used to the country. In town they think that everything's wrong." "Eh?" said Aunt Fan. "Wrong," shouted Prue. "The puppies. They think that everything's wrong." "What a pity," said Aunt Fan. And before we could stop her, she had led the puppies onto the other escalator, and they disappeared once again into the bowels of the earth. Once we had got rid of the puppies, in spite of feeling somewhat jaded by our experiences, we had quite a satisfactory morning's shopping. Mother got all the things she needed. Margot got her yeast and maple syrup, and I, while they were purchasing these quite unnecessary items, managed to procure a beautiful red cardinal, a black spotted salamander as fat and as shiny as an eider down, and a stuffed crocodile. A stuffed crocodile. Right. Had to think about that for a moment. Each satisfied in our own way with our purchases, we returned to Balaclava Mansions. Every time I hear that, I kind of do this little twitch, because my de facto stepfather, Kees van der Graft, Cornelis van der Graft, but Kees for short, worked at the Balaclava Telephone Exchange. When we came to live with him in Melbourne when I was 9 years old, he was working there. He actually took me there to the exchange one time and showed me how everything all plugged in, all the telephone, all the electronics or electrics, or however it works, all the wiring, how they had to switch things over sometimes. I said, what do you do, Case? Most of the time, he said, I sit and I play cards with the other co-workers. What, you get paid to play cards? He said, that's why I chose this job, he said. After being a slave labourer in Little Baldora for 18 months, with men dying left, right and centre, putting together the V1 and V2 rockets, he said, I swore to myself I would never work hard again, and so I never have. It seemed quite sensible and sound to my childish mind. Anyway, he worked there quite a long time. He retired, got a good retirement package under advice from my mother, because he was given 2 options, and one option, forget how it worked, but anyway, the first option, my mother said, don't do that, you'll get less money, take the second option. Most of his co-workers, the men, took the first option and ripped themselves off, but the option Case got ensured that he would keep being paid for quite a long time into the future. It was very wise of my mother to work that out. It was worded in such a way that, you know, it was hard to comprehend, but my mother was a highly intelligent woman, and when it came to money, she was quite savvy. So anyway, he profited quite well by that sensible advice. And he was stingy and mean. Didn't really help us all that much, quite frankly. It helped pay for his cruises going home to Holland once or twice a year. Yes, but a lot of that was paid for him being a card shark and counting the cards and robbing his own fellow Dutch friends, because they were inveterate gamblers and they were all wealthy. They didn't really mind. They must have known that he was counting cards, surely. No, they were oblivious. No one's that stupid to throw away good money to someone that's conning them. Anyway, my mother went on to marry another con man after Case, so she must have liked con men. Putrid. But anyway, I never married a con man. I married only once, and that was enough for me. Right, well anyway, he was a con man too, in a way. 50% of nothing is nothing. Robbing his own bloody daughters. Son of a bitch. But anyway, never mind. Where were we? Oh yes. Each satisfied in our own way with our purchases, we returned to Balaclava Mansions. At Margaret's insistence, Mother had decided that she would attend the séance that evening. Don't do it, Louise dear, Cousin Prue said. It's dabbling with the unknown. Mother justified her action with a remarkable piece of logic. I feel I ought to meet this Mawake person, she said to Prue. After all, he's giving Margot treatment. Well, dear, said Prue, seeing that Mother was adamant. I think it's madness, but I shall have to come with you. I can't let you attend one of those things on your own. I begged to be allowed to go too, as I pointed out to Mother. I had some little time previously. Borrowed a book from Theodore on the art, I think he meant time ago. Borrowed a book from Theodore on the art of exposing fake mediums. So I felt that my knowledge, thus acquired, might come in exceedingly useful. I don't think we ought to take Mummy, said Prue. I think it might have a bad effect on her. Oh my goodness, we're 2.5 hours in. Oh well, there's been a few segues today, so that's My doing, people of Earth. My doing. So at 6 o'clock that evening, with Prue palpitating in our midst like a newly caught bird, we made our way down to Mrs. Haddock's basement room. The subject of newly caught palpitating birds. What you doing, little boys? You've been good. Right. Here we found quite a collection of people. There was Mrs. Glutt, the manageress of the hotel, a tall, saturnine Russian with an accent so thick that he sounded as though he was speaking through a mouthful of cheese. A young and very earnest blonde girl, and a vapid young man who, rumour had it, was studying to be an actor, but whom we had never seen do anything more strenuous than doze peacefully in the palm-fringed lounge. Starting to feel light-headed and dizzy. We'll carry on, people of Earth. We'll carry on. Talk about my family of origin. I suddenly start feeling very weak and ill indeed. It's no accident in the universe about that. So we'll carry on, we'll push through it. To my annoyance, Mother would not let me search the room before we started for hidden cords or fake ectoplasm. However, I did manage to tell Mrs. Haddock about the book I had been reading, as I thought that if she was genuine it would be of interest to her. The look she bestowed upon me was anything but benevolent. Well, one simply doesn't like being told that one is a fraud, quite frankly. One should be delicate about how one goes about casting aspersions on someone's psychic abilities and reputation. I get it. We sat in a circle holding hands and got off to a rather inauspicious start since, as the lights were switched out, Prue uttered a piercing scream and leapt out of the chair she had been sitting in. It was discovered that the handbag she had leaned against the leg of the chair had slipped and touched her leg with a leathery clutch. When we had calmed Prue and assured her that she had not been assaulted by an evil spirit, we all returned to our chairs and held hands again. The illumination was from a night light that guttered and blinked in a saucer and sent shadows rippling down the room and made our faces look as though they were newly arisen from a very old grave. Now I don't want any talking, and I must ask you all to keep your hands firmly clasped so that we don't lose any of the essence. Wah, said Mrs. Haddock. I know there are unbelievers amongst us, and nevertheless I ask you to make your minds quiet and receptive. What does she mean? Whispered Prue to Mother. I'm not an unbeliever. My trouble is I believe too much. Having given us our instructions, Mrs. Haddock then took up her position in an armchair and with deceptive ease went into a trance. I watched her narrowly. I was determined not to miss the ectoplasm. At first she just sat there with her eyes closed, and there was no sound except for the rustle and quiver of the agitated Prue. And then Mrs. Haddock started to breathe deeply. Presently she began to snore richly and vibrantly. It sounded like a sack of potatoes being emptied across a loft floor. I was not impressed. Snoring, after all, was one of the easiest things to fake. It's got a point there, actually. Prue's hand clutching mine was moist with perspiration, and I could feel her shivers of apprehension running down her arm. "Ah," said Mrs. Haddock suddenly, and Prue leapt in her chair and uttered a small, despairing squeak, as though she had been stabbed. "Ah," said Mrs. Haddock, extracting the full dramatic possibilities from this simple utterance. "I don't like it," whispered Prue shakily. "Louise, dear, I don't like it." "Be quiet or you'll spoil it all," whispered Margot. "Relax and make your mind receptive." "I see strangers among us," said Mrs. Haddock suddenly, with such a strong Indian accent that it made me want to giggle. "Strangers who have come to join the circle. To them I say, welcome." The only extraordinary thing about this, as far as I was concerned, was that Mrs. Haddock was no longer stringing her words together and no longer uttering that strange inhalation of breath. She mumbled and muttered for a moment or so, incomprehensibly, and then said clearly, "This is Mawake." "Ooh," said Margaret, delighted. "He's come. There you are, Mother. That's Mawake. Don't they mean Margot?" "Margot? Why are they suddenly calling her Margaret? Does he do that to see if we're keeping up? By the gods." "I think I'm going to faint," said Prue. I stared at Mrs. Haddock in the dim, shaky light, and I could not see any signs of ectoplasm or trumpets. "Mawake says," announced Mrs. Haddock, "that the white girl must have no more punctures." There. He's now starting to write Margaret again. "There," said Margaret triumphantly. "Well, I don't understand why they're changing the name all of a sudden. He's done that twice. He did that with Lucrezia, changing it to Lucretia. Is it someone's idea of a joke? The publisher or the editor, perhaps? By the gods, it's irritating beyond belief. Stick to the facts, people of Earth. I'm a bit rigid about facts and names." "There," said Margaret triumphantly. "White girl must obey Mawake, must not be influenced by disbelievers." I heard Mother snort belligerently in the gloom. "Mawake says that if white girl trusts him, before the coming of 2 moons, she will be cured. 2 moons is 2 months. Mawake says." But what Mawake was about to say was never vouchsafed for us, for, at that moment, a cat that had been drifting round the room, cloud-like and unobserved, jumped onto Prue's lap. Of course it did. Cats are like that, aren't they? They're so contemptuous of cat haters. Her scream was deafening. She leapt to her feet, shouting, "Louise! Louise! Louise!" and blundered like a bedazzled moth round the circle of people screaming every time she touched anything. Somebody had the good sense to switch on the lights before Prue, in her chicken-like panic, could do any damage. "I say, it's a bit much, what?" said the vapid young man. "You may have done her great harm," said the girl, glaring at Prue and fanning Mrs. Haddock with her handkerchief. "I was touched by something. It touched me, got on into my lap," said Prue tearfully. "Ectoplasm." "You spoiled everything," said Margot angrily. Margaret is now back to being Margot. Just as Mawake was coming through. "I think we've heard quite enough from Mawake," said Mother. "I think it's high time you stopped fooling around with this nonsense." It's actually a very dangerous thing to disrupt a medium in full trance like that. It is actually potentially life-threatening, not necessarily so, but it's actually can be quite damaging. Like, do not touch a medium when she's in trance. Do not interrupt a medium when she's in trance. But anyway, Mrs. Haddock, who had remained snoring with dignity throughout this scene, suddenly woke up. "Nonsense," she said, fixing her protuberant blue eyes on Mother. "You dare to call it nonsense? Waha?" It was one of the very few occasions when I had seen Mother really annoyed. She drew herself up to her full height of 4 feet 3.5 inches and bristled. "Charlatan," she said uncharitably to Mrs. Haddock. "I said it was nonsense, and it is nonsense. I'm not having my family mixed up with any jiggery-pokery like this. Come, Margot. Come, Jerry. Come, Prue. We will leave." Well, that's just astonishing, isn't it? All because of a pussycat. So astonished were we by this display of determination on the part of our normally placid mother that we followed her meekly out of the room, leaving the raging Mrs. Haddock and her several disciples. As soon as we reached the sanctuary of our room, Margot burst into floods of tears. "You've spoiled it! You've spoiled it!" she said, wringing her hands. "Mrs. Haddock will never speak to us again." "And a good job too," said Mother grimly, pouring out a brandy for the twitching and still distraught Prue. "Did you have a nice time?" asked Aunt Fan, waking suddenly and beaming at us owlishly. "No," said Mother shortly, "we didn't." "I can't get the thought of that ectoplasm out of my mind," said Prue, gulping brandy. "It was like a sort of, well, you know, squishy." Sorry, I have to laugh. "Just as Mawake was coming through," howled Margot. "Just as he was going to tell us something important." "I think you are wise to come back early," said Aunt Fan, "because even at this time of year it gets chilly in the evening." "I felt sure it was coming for my throat," said Prue. "I felt it going for my throat." Rather synchronous given my discussion earlier of my experience at the Mean Street Spiritualist Church. I'm loath to call it Christian, since there was clearly some demonic entities floating around there, human or non-human. Anyway, I felt it going for my throat. It was like a a squishy sort of hand thing. And Mawake's the only one that's done me any good. My father used to say that at this time of the year the weather can be very treacherous, said Aunt Fan. Margot, stop behaving so stupidly, said Mother crossly. And Louise, dear, I could feel this horrible sort of squishy fingers groping up towards my throat, said Prue, ignoring Margot, busy with the embroidery of her experience. My father always used to carry an umbrella, winter and summer, said Aunt Fan. People used to laugh at him, but many's a time, even on quite hot days, when he found he needed it. You always spoil everything, said Margot. You always interfere. The trouble is, I don't interfere enough, said Mother. I'm telling you, you're to stop all this nonsense, stop crying, and we are going back to Corfu immediately. If I hadn't leapt up when I did, said Prue, it would have fastened itself in my jugular. There's nothing more useful than a pair of galoshes, my father used to say, said Aunt Fan. I'm not going back to Corfu. I won't. I won't. You will do as you're told. It wound itself round my throat in such an evil way. He never approved of gumboots because he said they send the blood to the head. I had ceased listening. My whole being was flooded with excitement. We were going back to Corfu. We were leaving the gritty, soulless absurdity of London. We were going back to the enchanted olive groves and blue sea, to the warmth and laughter of our friends, to the long, golden, gentle days. And thus concludes chapter 5 and Interlude for Spirits. Hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, people of Earth. Quite a trip down memory lane. Explains a lot though, doesn't it? Really? At least when I was being strangled in the spiritualist church, I handled it. Said a prayer of protection and told the entity to naff the fuck off and sat through the entire service and didn't run away or create a scene or act like a baby. So, well, you know, it helps that I was raised in that culture, that I could comprehend what was going on and not freak the fuck out, people of Earth. But anyway, on that note, I bid you good afternoon. Have a beautiful day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. And I'll keep saying it this morning and I'll say it again. Always take the weather with you and show courtesy and respect for all beings across all vortices of time and space, because you never know whether you are entertaining angels, and if they demonstrate reasonable cause for concern or unkindness or life-threatening behaviours or attacks on your person, tell them to naff the fuck off. So there is that. A blessed be. Have a lovely day. From Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. Bye for now.